being recorded so that we're all aware of that. And can I also welcome any members of the public and press who might be with us today. And if there are public and press here, I'm asking you kindly to observe the meeting only, not to speak or participate. Can I also remind you all to switch your phones to silent for the duration of the meeting so that it doesn't interfere or cut across in any way? And can I also refer you to the protocols for remote meetings? And they are namely that your microphones should be switched to mute unless you're speaking. Should you wish to ask a question or make a comment, can you please indicate either through the chat function or by raising your electronic hand through Teams? I'll assume that you've all read the paperwork before us today prior to arriving at the meeting. And ask also that you only use the chat function to indicate if you wish to speak as an alternative to the electronic hand function or to raise any technical issues. When asking a question, can you please indicate which page number you're referring to as well? We turn to the agenda. The first item on the agenda is that we do a roll call. My name's Councillor Emlyn Dole. I'm the leader of Carmarthenshire County Council, and I'm present. I'll now call on Stacey from Neath Talbot's Democratic Services team to take the roll call. Stacey.
Thank you, Chair. So also from Carmarthenshire, I have Wendy Walters.
Present.
Thank you. Swansea, Councillor Rob Stewart.
Present.
Thank you. And Phil Roberts.
Present.
Thank you. Neath Talbot, Councillor Ted Latham.
Yeah, present, Stacey.
Thank you. And Chief Executive Karen Jones.
Present, Stacey.
Thank you. Pembrokeshire, Councillor David Simpson.
Present, yeah.
Thank you. And Will Bramble.
Present, Stacey.
Thank you. Brecon Beacons, we have Catherine Meelan-Jones. I know you're present. Thank you. And I still can't see Ali, so I'll just keep monitoring that for when if he attends through the meeting, I'll mark him as present when he joins us, hopefully. And then I have Pembrokeshire National Park, Tegrin Jones.
Yes, present.
Thank you. And Paul Harries.
Yes, Stacey.
Thank you. Are there any other members of the committee that I haven't called? Thank you. I won't be calling officers today. I'll just take that list from the participation. So thank you, Chair. The roll call is complete.
Thank you very much, Stacey. The next item on the agenda is declarations of interest. Can members please indicate whether you have any declarations in relation to the agenda that you have in front of you today? This is your chance to do that, and in front, and also before the specific agenda item. Catherine?
I'm aware that Aled wanted to declare an interest. I'm not sure what it was, just to be noted for when and if he hopefully does join. Thank you. Okay, thanks for that, and we'll note that. Thanks, Catherine. And anybody else? I don't see any, so we'll note that for if and when Aled does join us. The next item is item 3. That's the appointment of chair and vice chair for the South West Wales Corporate Joint Committees. You'll find the report on pages 3 to 6 of the papers. I now introduce Mr. Craig Griffiths, Head of Legal and Democratic Services for Neath Talbot Council and Monitoring Officer for the South West Wales Corporate Joint Committee, to present the report, please.
Thank you very much, Chair. So one of the first duties of the Corporate Joint Committee which you need to undertake is to formally appoint your chair and vice chair of the Corporate Joint Committee. This is an annual appointment which will be confirmed then at every annual general meeting that's ultimately held. And I've included in your papers just a short overview as to what the role of the chair ultimately would be, very much standard to the local government functions that we have and what we know a chair to be for those meetings. But happy to answer any questions members may have on that role before you actually take your vote on it, Chair.
Okay, thank you, Craig. If there are any, if anybody wants to raise anything or any questions, you can do that now. I don't see anything. Craig, thank you for that. So accordingly, I was going to ask for a proposer and seconder for the chair of the South West Wales Corporate Joint Committee, but also to add, I can see David and Ted already. I was also going to add that I'm prepared to propose from the chair, but I don't need to. I've got 2 already showing that, and I saw David first, Ted. So I'll go to David. Yeah.
Thank you very much. Can I propose Rob Stewart, leader of Swansea, for the chair, please?
Thank you, David, for the proposal. Ted?
Yeah, second, Your Honour.
Okay, thank you very much. So
It's been proposed and seconded then that Councillor Rob Stewart, leader of Swansea, is our chair. Can I ask if anybody is not in favour? Can I ask you to indicate by raising your electronic hand if you're not in favour? And I can see Aled is waiting to be admitted, so I'm sure we'll do that, Stacey. I'm not seeing any hands, so I'll take it therefore that we are all in favour. There are no indications to the contrary, so the recommendation has therefore been approved. I'd ask now, if I can, for a proposer and seconder for vice chair of the South West Wales Corporate Joint Committee, if somebody's prepared to move. Rob?
Yes, Emlyn, if I could move Councillor Emlyn Dole then, leader of Carmarthenshire, as vice chair.
Thank you very much, Rob. Thank you, David. It's been proposed then and seconded. Can I ask once again, if anyone is not in favour, could I ask you to indicate by raising your electronic hand? Once again, I don't see any hands raised, so I take that as a vote that we are all in favour. No indications to the contrary. That recommendation has also been approved, and thank you very much for the nomination and for your support. Can I thank you all members? I'm going to hand over now to Councillor Rob Stewart, who will chair the remainder of the meeting. And congratulations, Rob, on your appointment as chair of the committee.
Thank you very much, Emlyn, and thank you, colleagues, for that support. I very much appreciate it and look forward to working with all of you closely over the coming year. Sorry, Stacey, you got your hand up there. Did you want to come in?
Sorry, Chair, before you move to the substantive meeting, Aled is now present, and I believe he might have had a declaration for you to see to before you proceed to the business of the meeting. Thanks.
Okay,
yes.
Certainly.
Yeah.
Aled, come in.
Colleagues, yeah, can I just apologise for my technical issues? I just want to declare a personal interest that I do have a role with the South Wales Consortium with regional governance, and that is held by RCT, but it's a personal matter, and I don't think it compromises me in any way. But sorry for the delay.
No problem, Aled. Good to have you with us, and thank you for that. We'll make sure that you get the form to formally confirm that interest in due course. But thank you. We'll note that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Can
I just also note that I just couldn't get in, but I would obviously have voted for both matters as well. So thank you very much.
No problem, Aled. That's okay. They were statutory votes, so that's fine. That's no problem at all. Okay, we'll move forward. But before we go on to item 4, can I, on behalf of, I'm sure all members of the committee, offer Emlyn and Carmarthenshire our condolences on the passing of Mair. I'm, a very, very fine councillor and a great servant to Carmarthenshire, and I'm sure she'll be missed by all who knew her. So, Emlyn, if you take our condolences and sympathies for that.
I'll do that, Rob, and that's very much appreciated. Thank you all.
Thank you. Okay, we'll move on to first item then of my part of the agenda. If I can go to item 4, which is the adoption of the Constitution and Procedural Rules. And again, if I can call Craig in to take us through the report, which members will find within their packs.
Well, thank you very much, Chair. So as I mentioned earlier on, corporate joint committees are very much a creature of statute. So what that means is the legislation that's been created over the last year effectively sets out the various roles and responsibilities ultimately that the corporate joint committee will have. And it prescribes, for the majority of cases, the manner in which those decisions then have to be executed. So what we're aiming to do with this constitution is effectively adopt a set of standing orders, which the corporate joint committee then will governance itself by over the period in which the CJC is being implemented. A couple of major points that come out of it, which members should be aware of, is one of the elements that is built in is the appointment of some of the statutory roles which are necessary. So these are roles which we have in local government, which have also been extended ultimately to the corporate joint committee. It's proposed that the role of the chief executive be rotated annually between the constituent councils Neath, Talbot, Pembrokeshire, Carmarthen and Swansea, with the first chief executive being from Neath, Talbot County Borough Council, Mrs. Karen Jones. The Section 151 Chief Finance Officer be held by Chris Moore from Carmarthenshire County Council, and the Monitoring Officer be myself, Craig Griffiths of Neath, Talbot County Borough Council. They are some of the key elements which are built into it so that the CJC can demonstrate that it is meeting its statutory responsibilities in appointing these roles. We've also then tried to build in some of the governance regime ultimately that's built within the corporate joint committees and how you will effectively make decisions going forward. And the legislation requires us to create scrutiny committees, governance and audit committees, and then we've chosen and drafted into the main documents the creation of 4 subcommittees to deal with the specific areas which the Corporate Joint Committee is going to look at over the course of the next few years, being in the areas of strategic planning, transport, economic well-being, and energy, then following under the strand of economic well-being as well. So the report itself is ultimately before members, which includes a copy of the Constitution. There's also a few procedural rules which we'll be asking members to adopt here today, and they are the rules of procedure which will govern how our meetings take place and are almost very identical to what most local authorities would utilise because we've just rolled them over into the process of the Corporate Joint Committee role. We're also creating what we call an access to information procedure rules, which in effect then ultimately set out how the information which we consider in the Corporate Joint Committee will meet our legislative obligations by being held in public and the various processes surrounding that. We also have a draft code of conduct for members of the Corporate Joint Committee to adopt, which I would add as well is identical to the version which is used by all other constituent councils, national park authorities, because we adopt the standard model which has been provided by Welsh Government over recent years. I would add, though, in respect of this matter, I have had some comments this week from our Brecon Beacon's colleagues with regards to some potential amendments to the Constitution and documents. They are very much welcomed, and I'll work with the monitoring officer over the next few days to incorporate those comments into the draft. So with everyone's approval, Chair, what I propose to do is bring an updated version back at our next meeting at the end of this month, which will just reflect some of those minor changes which are necessary to correct a couple of typos and a few other matters as well. But the recommendations, Chair, are set out in your report on page 7, which effectively ask you to adopt all of these documents which provides the Constitution, and I'll be happy to answer any questions that members may have, Chair.
Yeah, thank you, Craig, for that. Really clear. Again, just for members' awareness, obviously there's nothing preventing us agreeing the Constitution today, and as Craig said, under the delegated authority that he has, he can make minor changes to the Constitution then and bring that document back at our next meeting. So again, if I could look then, if everybody's happy, to the statutory partners, those are the 4 local councils to cast their vote on this one. As Craig said, the recommendations are there on page 7. So if you're in favour of the adopting the Constitution as laid out, subject to what Craig has just said, if you could please cast your vote now, please. Okay, thank you very much. So that's yes, 4 members. Sorry, I've got another hand up. Mr. Harries, did you want to come in? Apologies.
Yeah, I did before you took the vote, but you have taken the vote now, so it's too late. But my query was, you know, the involvement from the national parks. The Constitution includes a whole raft of things that the national parks are involved in, and I was just checking that it was the wish of the committee to exclude the national park from voting on the adoption of the Constitution, or you think it's or do you think it's just inappropriate that the national park vote on the Constitution?
Yeah, as you say, we've taken the vote, but I'm more than happy to clarify that. I think there is a very clear guidance laid down in the Act, and I can call Craig in to give you a more detailed answer if you wish on that. But I think the voting rights are clearly outlined in terms of the legislation. But Craig, I'll go over to you just if you want to clarify that position.
Of course, Chair, you're absolutely correct, yes. So what we've built into the Constitution itself is taken from the legislative elements which give national park representatives the vote in respect of strategic planning related functions. The legislation and guidance at this stage suggests that any other decisions obviously are in respect of the CJC itself with regards to scrutiny and governance and audit and any other representation. But we've adopted what is the legislative principles at this stage which have been brought forward by Welsh Government, and that the strategic planning matter is the area where the national parks would have voting rights in respect of that matter.
Okay, thank you, Craig. That's helpful. Mr. Harries?
Yeah, just to come back to Craig's report, you know, If it helps, page 10, item 12, where he's laid out that National Park members may only vote where the matters to be decided is about strategic planning functions and associated issues. It's this associated issues. What are the associated issues with regard to planning functions? I think that's a bit of a grey area, which has left me in a bit of confusion. Maybe Craig can answer that.
Craig?
Of course, Chair. The associated matters relates to governance of the strategic planning related matters alone. So it's any decisions which are taken in respect of strategic planning. What this constitution is looking to do is set up all basically a number of other different areas. So, for example, the statutory officers, the scrutiny functions, governance and audit and all of those elements. When there are specific governance matters relating to strategic planning, then as the constitution sets out and as covered by the legislation, there are voting rights then ultimately to the national parks at that point, but it wouldn't be in regards to the overarching governance structure in the sense as to how the CJC is designed to function. So we're taking what the principles are that come out of the guidance and the legislation at this stage, Chair.
Okay, thank you again, Craig, for that. Aled, I'll go to you next.
Yeah, thank you very much. Thank you for the question and thank you for the answers, Craig. Obviously, in the Brecon Beacons, we wouldn't want to be in any way hindering the process at this point or creating obstacles. I think the one reflection that we would have, because we've got a really distinctive role in the sense that we cover 3 CJCs, and that makes us rather unique as a national park. And I suspect that we'd want to put a marker in the ground, if that's appropriate, that we would want to reflect further on scrutiny and audit. But we would need to reflect on that. But I'm grateful for the advice and the information that you've given, Craig, and for the positive way in which you responded to our communications with you. Thank you, Craig.
Yeah, Aled, thank you very much. That's understood, and I know you've been in conversation with officers in the run-up to this meeting, so that's understood. But as we've now agreed the Constitution, thank you for that, colleagues. We'll move on to item 5, which was the forward work programme of the Chief Executive. So I'll go to Karen Jones, Chief Executive Neath Talbot, and the lead Chief Executive for CJC to take us through this item.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you as well for your support in leading this work for the first year of the CJC. I look forward to working with everybody, and particularly my fellow Chief Executive colleagues as well. I think we need to carry on in the spirit of partnership that we've started, which has enabled us to get to the point we've got to today. This report hopefully is fairly straightforward. The first part of the report should be familiar, I think, to everybody by now. It's just reminding us all of what the work is that the Corporate Joint Committees are required to do in the legislation. So those are the areas that Craig has already mentioned around strategic land use planning, the economic wellbeing powers that we are able to exercise, and also those duties in respect of transport. What we also will need to give attention to in the work programme is a range of associated governance matters. Because the CJC is to be treated as part of the local government family, as members are already aware, there are other things that we will need to put in place to complete the setting up of the CJC. For example, the Welsh Language Commissioner has already been in contact in relation to the way in which he would be looking to apply the Welsh language standards under the Welsh language measure. So what we'll do over the coming weeks and months is we'll have a detailed forward work programme for the Corporate Joint Committee, setting out what business we're expecting to bring before you over the next 12 months. So you've got some visibility of that, and I hope that'll be helpful. The second part of the report then is setting out for all members of the committee what the duties on the Chief Executive actually are. So that's just there for you to note. But the decision we're asking for today is that you give me delegated authority to negotiate and enter into service level agreements with the relevant local authorities, because in setting up the CJC, we've adopted the principle that we will buy back the services in the first instance from the constituent councils in line with the Constitution that you've just agreed. and we will then keep that under review. It is not our intention at this point for the Corporate Joint Committee to directly employ anyone. So essentially we'll be buying those services in from the constituent councils, and I need the authority to put the agreements in place between the CJC and those authorities, and then to agree any fees that are appropriate to that. The detail of that is set out on page 141, paragraph 33, Chair, if members were wanting to look at the detail of that. So that's all I wanted to say by way of speaking to the report, Chair. I'm happy to take questions on it before you deal with the recommendations, if there are any.
Thank you for that, Karen, and again, thank you for agreeing to take on the work of the inaugural year of the CJCs. I guess just one thing to mention, which is I'm sure obvious certainly to all of the politicians on the call, is we've got the period of elections to get through very shortly, and I know we all hope to be back here after May the 5th. But that will impede a little bit of work in terms of being able to meet, because obviously we've got the pre-election period from the 18th of March up to the 5th of May. So just for us to, obviously everybody's aware of that, but just to put it on record, that there will be a unique year for more than one reason this year, given that we've got the elections to get through as well. I'll go to David next. David Simpson.
Thank you very much. You've actually done what I wanted to do, I think. I just wanted to thank the Chief Exec of Neath Talbot for all the work she's done so far in putting all these papers together, and all the work she's done to get the CJCs off the ground. I know it is an awful lot of work for all the chief execs, but particularly for Neath Talbot, I think she's done a tremendous job. So thank you very much indeed for that. And I think the way forward, buying in the services from each authority, is for this year the way to do it. And I compliment the way it's going to go. And thank you very much indeed.
Thanks, David. Yeah, absolutely. I think we all echo those comments. Okay, so are there any questions for Karen before we move to the vote? And again, just to make clear for members, this again is a statutory vote item, so they will be votes cast only by MPT Pembrokeshire, Swansea and Carmarthenshire. So again, if I could ask those with the votes to cast their vote on this one by showing their hands, please. Thanks very much. All those in favour, thank you. That's unanimous. So thank you for that. Thank you, Karen. And then we'll go on to our final item for today, which is the draft annual budget. If I could call on Chris Moore to take us through this item, please. Chris, over to you.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you to the committee for putting the confidence in me to undertake this role and appointing me this afternoon. As you've got in front of you, you have got a paper which was on the presumption that appointment was going to take place, and I'll run through that now to explain where we are with the budget. Obviously, it's been quite challenging in many respects because we're developing a new committee here and a new functions here, and things are changing day by day to understand the what's involved. But certainly the paper hopefully indicates the starting point, and as you will have noted from reading the paper, that there will be a further report coming back later in the month to actually confirm the budget. But there are a certain number of elements that need to be approved so that we can actually produce that final budget. I think the first thing is obviously the recommendation in here that actually you're requesting Carmarthenshire County Council to act as the accountable body to discharge the financial obligations in respect of the South West Wales CJC. And then the report goes on then really to highlight some of the legislation around the requirements of setting the budget, etc. There is need to set a budget for current year, and that budget is possible to set at the appropriate level. Within the paper, you will notice that the proposal is that the budget is set at zero and that we raise a zero levy for this year. That is twofold, really, is that a lot of the authorities have done quite a substantial amount of work preparing, but have absorbed that within the authority, and also that we've had a £250,000 grant for certain items of development from Welsh Government, same as the other regions, towards the setting up of the CJC, and therefore my recommendation is on that you formally you formally approve today that there is that we will not be raising a levy, and the budget will be a zero budget for 21-22. It's very strange to actually be setting a budget in January when the year end actually comes along in March. So it is a very obscure and strange situation to be in, whereas you would have normally expected the budget to be prepared before the year. The obligation on the CJC is to set the budget moving forward into next year so that it provides for enough resources to undertake its role, and also to undertake to set itself in a position in terms of reserves and other matters so that it can function appropriately as a local authority or any organisation you would expect. We are obligated to recover the cost of the operating of that authority via a levy being based on the constituent authorities, and if appropriate, the national parks. And I say if appropriate, the national parks, because the national parks has a role in certain areas, and is particularly in the strategic planning area, and therefore there is some debate in terms of the levy that is chargeable in that respect. So if we look at the situation of the draft budget is attached on the appendix, and it is actually broken down in some detail there with some explanations. You will see that you've got the joint committee function at the beginning, then you've got the support, and you've also got the subcommittee functions, and you will be aware that there are a number of subcommittees, four in total: economic development, planning, transport and energy. At the moment, from the work streams that have been undertaken in that area, the only costs that have been identified are around transport and energy, and therefore the strategic planning element at the moment, from where they're working to at the moment, is they're not expecting to accrue costs next year in respect of that I need to budget for from the work that they're doing. They are setting it together with a minimum operation where they're developing with the use of existing resources through the individual constituent authorities and the national parks. So that's the feedback I've had, and therefore there is no need to actually set a charge this year. The energy and the transport are two that I've had figures through, and I've included them within the budget. There is also then the proposal within the budget that we do have the reference is a business manager. Whether actually that is the right terminology, or when we actually finalise it will be a different terminology, but a manager to coordinate the function of CJC on behalf of us all, and that is budgeted with some other estimated fees at the moment. Obviously this budget has been brought together from a zero base, and it will vary, and it's presented here today for you to note, but it will be coming back in a very similar form at the end of the month to formally approve for next year. And I don't see there being a significant variance from here, but it does give the opportunity to digest it at this point in time before formally approving it. In addition, in terms of formally approving it, I do need the guidance and the approval here today as to the appropriate way of actually charging out to the various authorities. You will notice within the report that there have been a number of formats in terms of proposals for actually calculating how the levy is actually applied to the constituent authorities, and there are three options presented within the report. One is on an equal split, one is actually on population, and the other one is on area size. The conclusion of officers of the four constituent authorities, and I am referring to the constituent authorities at the moment, where I've actually consulted with the Section 151s, is that the population is the fairest way. So that is one of the key recommendations here again today, is that as members you agree to apportion the cost of the CJC on a population basis. What isn't agreed today, and what isn't actually something that I can put forward as a final proposal today, is any financial contribution that the national parks are asked to actually provide. There is ongoing dialogue with Welsh Government and also the other regional corporate joint committees in terms of what is the most appropriate funding basis for the national parks. And some of your national park colleagues were a party to a meeting earlier on in the week where that was discussed. There are a number of options that have been considered on an all Wales basis around application of population, application of gross expenditure, application of planning expenditure only, a straight allocation or proportional split, and indeed where I believe that the consensus went is that probably it's something with a variation around population, but linked purely to the strategic planning. There is also the consideration and that we consider, because of the position next year where there is actually no costs accruing directly for the strategic planning, that we as the South West Wales CJC, that we actually agree at the meeting later in the month that actually there is no levy charge for next year. But we need to allow the dialogue with the regions to just go a little bit further before the end of the month, before we conclude that. But I will come back with a recommendation at the next meeting, and I will liaise with all parties before that on the actual position there in terms of that. I think it is also recognised that the national parks, in supporting a budget or do have some procedural matters to put in place within their own constituent authorities, and they will be able to do that if that's not in place at this point in time before the next meeting, in concluding and voting on the budget later this month. So hopefully I've covered off most of the aspects, Chair. What we're asking today is that you actually recommend and approve that actually Carmarthenshire becomes the accountable body in respect to the financial obligations, that we set a zero budget for 21-22 and effectively no levy is raised, that the to ensure fairness and equity, that the levy apportionment to the constituent authorities is actually calculated on a basis of an apportionment of population, and that you note the draft budget as it stands, and you note that currently there is no firm conclusion in respect of how the national parks financial contribution comes into the equation at the moment, but the position will be updated in the meeting on the 25th of January. So hopefully I've covered off on most aspects. I'll willingly take any questions on any element. Thank you, Chair.
Yeah, many thanks, Chris. That's really helpful in terms of a detailed run through. David, I'll bring you in if you've got questions for Chris.
It's not a question, actually. Likewise, I'd like to thank Chris for all his efforts in preparing all the figures and getting it all together. I certainly like his method of how we're going to pay each authority on population size. I welcome that one. I think it's the right move. And I'd just like to propose the recommendations as on page 145. Thank you.
Thank you, David. Thank you for formally moving them. I'm quite happy to formally second. Are there any other further questions or points of clarification before we go to the vote? Again, the budget item is one where it's only the 4 constituent local authorities that are able to vote. But Aled, before I do take the vote, I'll come to you. Aled?
Yeah, just a quick note to thank Chris for that clarity and also for the recognition that that conversation around the Brecon Beacons and other park is ongoing. So I'm immensely grateful to Chris for that clarity, and we will now proceed, I think, with that in mind. Thank you very much.
Many thanks, Aled. Those comments are noted, I'm sure. Okay, if I could ask the leaders of Carmarthenshire, Pembrokeshire, Neath, Talbot to indicate if they're in favour. Thank you very much. Yes, that's again unanimous, so thank you all for that. That therefore concludes our business for today in terms of the reports. I haven't been advised of any urgent items, but if there are any further comments anybody wishes to make, I'm more than happy to take them now. If not, can again thank you for your support to become chair. Can I, on behalf of Emlyn, obviously thank on behalf of making Emlyn vice chair and all of the officers who've been nominated into post today, and again look forward to working closely with all of you over the coming year as we bring the CJC into proper being and get on with the work programme. So thank you all very much for your intelligence. Diolch yn fawr. I will see you all soon. Take care.